Please be seated.
All right. So we are continuing our message, our series here on missing peace. And we're talking about that the last week and this week. And we're actually going to be talking about this next week. And then it will finish this up actually on Christmas Eve. That's actually when we'll finish this series on Christmas Eve. And I thought it was great for us just to think about this idea of missing peace a little bit as we ramp up to Christmas. Last week we talked about, is peace even possible in 2024, right? We talked about that a little bit and about this idea of peace and what it really is. And one of the things we said last week at the end of the sermon and as we were ending, and the last kind of thought that we were left with is this: it's that idea that peace isn't found in the absence of problems, right? Peace isn't found in the absence of problems. Peace is found in the presence of God, right? That's where we find peace. And so that's where we left off last week, and that's where we kind of concluded with that idea. And this morning we're going to continue a little bit with this idea of peace and this idea of missing peace, and talk a little bit about some things that maybe I think are things that maybe cause people to lack peace in their lives. And as we ramp up to this Christmas season, I think this is a perfect opportunity to talk about this a little bit. And I got a question for you. Do you know someone, can you guys think of someone in your life maybe that is difficult to love? Like really difficult to love, right? Can you think of anybody like that? I mean, when I think of that, I think of like the Grinch movie, right? He was a little difficult to love, right? The people of Whoville, and he's a little grumpy. He's a little whatever, he doesn't get into the Christmas spirit, and they're all about it and stuff like that, or whatever. I would think he is somebody that's kind of a little bit difficult to love, right? Like that's kind of what I think about, right? But I wonder, is there somebody in your life that you can think of that you're like, man, that person's just they're just difficult to love, right? They're difficult to get along with. There's just something there, whatever it is in the relationship or whatever that you can think of. And I think a lot of us have that in our lives. I think we have someone that we could probably think of that we go, they're sort of difficult to love. And this time of year, I think, normally has its fair share of like relational crazy, right? I think this time of year can have its fair share of relational crazy, right? You got so much going on. You're getting ready for all the festivities of Christmas and all that kind of stuff, and all the Christmas shopping, and you go to the stores and stuff, and they're just packed with people, and it makes people kind of on edge, I think, a lot, and that kind of stuff. And so there's this idea of this relational crazy, I think this time of year especially, that can happen. And I think this year, I think it's even worse because we're coming off of this election year, right? We've had this election, we've had all this stuff, and there's just all this extra crazy right now this time of year. And so when you think about that, right, it's not to mention this extra craziness from this election year, but experts say that they feel like it will take decades to fully see and understand the impact of COVID and the COVID days, right? And that wasn't that far removed from those days, and there's a lot of things, I think, that are still lingering from that time. And then you add in the election year, and you add in all that stuff, and now you're in the holidays, and there's just a lot of this extra kind of crazy going on at this time. And you think about, like, in the COVID days and all the ramifications from that, I think there's this physical, emotional, and mental and kind of relational health issues that we have in society right now. And I think it stems some from that because of some of the things that happen there with the isolation and people that are still trying to figure some of that stuff out. And we've kind of starting to move past that, but I think in a way, I think there's still some of that is still holding on in our lives, and it still just adds and makes relationship stuff still a little bit more tense, a little bit more challenging at times. And we're coming out of that, and then you add in the election year and all that, and I think there's this time of year there can be this this depression and isolation for a lot of people, where they kind of start to feel that type of thing, or as we've been dealing with all of this stuff, right, that maybe people have been dealing with just kind of disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. They feel like there's no control. They don't have control over this or that. Maybe the election wasn't a great thing for them in their minds, and they're going, I had no control over it. This happened, and I wish this had happened or that happened, or my family's a mess because I say this at the dinner table and they don't like it. And there's all kinds of things like that right now. And there's this mix of kind of politics and religion at this time of year that I think happens, and especially at the dinner table, it can become a place where it can get a little crazy at times. Right? When you're talking about families and relationships and you're getting together at Christmas time, there are families that may get together for Christmas time, and somebody might talk about Christmas and the birth of Christ and all that, and there may be somebody at the table going, I don't believe in any of that. And it can cause some issues there. And then, of course, you bring in politics into the mix, and then it can go all over the place, right? And there's this idea, this relational crazy. And there's people that have said, these experts that have said that what they call it is, they say we live in what they call the age of perpetual offense. I think I kind of like that term, because honestly, I think if you look at our culture and you look at the people around, I think it fits actually pretty well that we live in this age of perpetual offense. You think about it, like some of these new terms that I'd never really heard of until a few years ago, this idea, this cancel culture, right? That like if you don't agree with somebody, they're canceled, right? You just get a bunch of people together, you say, we're going to cancel them. We're going to totally shut them down. We don't like their message. We don't like what they're saying, so we're going to cancel them because we're offended by what it is that they're talking about. And I think at this day and age, I think people, in a lot of ways, I think there's a lot of people that are very quick to judge, quick to condemn, quick to call foul, right? Like it's just like, that's not right, that's not okay, and they're very quick to be offended. And I think in this culture, I think that you're almost like sometimes you feel like you're walking on your tippy toes a little bit and like kind of sneaking around, like I don't want to offend somebody. Like if I say this, they might get offended. Like even Merry Christmas, right? I've started thinking, you know what? I don't really want to offend people, right? It's not my point. I don't go out thinking I'm going to offend somebody, right? And I don't want to do that. So I've started thinking maybe I shouldn't use Merry Christmas, right? Because I think, because it's Merry Christmas, and I think some people get offended by that word. So instead, I'm just like, I hope you have a happy holiday celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, and I pray that you, like that. I'm like, let's bring it up a notch. Maybe somebody won't be offended by that. I don't know. I just think it's crazy that you have to think that way, right? That there are people that would be offended by Merry Christmas. Right? You know what I mean? Like, it makes me want to say, instead of Merry Christmas, I'll just say, hey, I hope you have a great day celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ and, the one and only Lord and Savior of this world. So, you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to be offended, be offended. I don't, whatever. But, like, I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just wishing you a Merry Christmas. But that's the world that we live in, right? This age of perpetual offense, this age of this cancel culture, and if they don't like what you say, they're gonna just cancel you. They're gonna do whatever. They're gonna get upset with you, mad at you because of little things, right? And here's the thing. I think what we need to think about is this: if you are on a continuous search to be offended, you will always find what you were looking for, right? If you're on a continuous search to be offended, you will always find what you're looking for. Right? And I think there's people out there that I think that's kind of their mentality, right? They're always looking for what they can be offended by. And then they're surprised when they find it. I'm like, well, if you go looking for it, you're going to find it, right? Like I think that's logical. And I think in our culture, I think that's how a lot of people live. And the problem is you can't win in life that way. Right? You can't win in life that way, just constantly being offended. You're not going to be a productive member of society when you're just constantly offended by everything, or when you're just constantly looking for the next thing to be offended by. That's not productive, right? My life is not going to be better by me constantly looking for things to be offended by so I can then prove those people wrong or try to convince them that I'm right or whatever. Like that's not how we should be living life. That's not what we should be doing, but there are a lot of people I think that do that life that way. And here's the thing. The thing is, the truth is, being offended is inevitable. right? It's inevitable. You're going to be offended at some time by something, right? But living offended is a choice, right? Living offended is a choice. It's a choice that we make. And I think this morning, as we talk about this idea of missing peace, I think there's a lot of people out there that are missing peace in their life because they're walking around offended, right? They're offended by this, they're offended by that, and they just, little things just cause such issues in their life, and they just get so mad about it, and they just can't let it go. And they're like, I'm just so, I can't believe that person did that, and I'm so mad, and they stew on it, and then, they kind of maybe forget about it for a day or two, and then a couple days later, like, I remember the other day they did that, man, I can't believe that, I'm so mad right now, and it's like, they're constantly losing their peace in their life because of these little offenses and these things that they've gone and they've looked for, right? Here's the thing, I think this, people drive me crazy. Like, right? I think, does anybody agree with me? Like, people can drive you crazy, right? I think there are people in our lives sometimes that can just drive us crazy, right? I look at this and I'm going, I picture me and my brother when we were like little kids, right? And like, we'd be at each other all the time. He would just drive me crazy, and I know I drove him crazy, right? Like, we had plenty of little tiffs and stuff like that because of little tiny things. Like, we'd be playing Atari football, and it's like these little box dudes, whatever, on this game, and I would like beat him every single time, like literally every time, because there was this one play that if I ran this one play, he couldn't do anything about it. It was like a touchdown every single time. I don't know why it was that way, but I figured it out. He would get really, really mad about it, and he, for whatever reason, and I'm not really sure why, he couldn't figure it out, but he would get really mad, and I'm going, dude, it's Atari football, right? But he'd get so mad about it. He's like, I can't believe you beat me, like, you're cheating. I'm like, I don't see how I'm cheating. I'm just playing the game, dude, right? You know what I mean? But like, people can drive you crazy. There are people in our lives, I think, that can drive us crazy. I think there are people that we go, man, these people, they drive me crazy. They're constantly offended. There's something there that they constantly are rubbing me the wrong way. And I think Scripture has some stuff to tell us about that, right? I think if we read Scripture in Romans chapter 12, verses 14 through 18, this is what it says. It says, bless those who persecute you. I'm going to read that one again. Bless those who persecute you. Bless, do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. I love this one. Live in harmony with everyone. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. I'm like, whew, okay. And then it keeps going. It says this, do not repay anyone evil for evil, right? Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Easy, right? Right? You read that and you go, I got that one. That's easy. Next, right? Like, yeah. No, it's not easy to do that, right? Paul says, we're to bless those who persecute you. Have you really thought about that before? Like, what does that really mean? Like, to bless those that persecute you. We're not talking about someone who just, they said something I didn't care for, whatever. Okay, whatever. No, this is somebody who persecutes you, which means they're intentionally trying to harm you. What's he say to do? To bless them. I go, whoa, like that's not easy to do, right? That's not an easy thing to do. And when you read this idea of bless in the original language, the word there was eulogo. Eulogo, yes. Eulogo is the word, basically. And it's kind of the same place we got the word eulogy, okay? And this idea of it's you, which is good. So it's eulogeo, I guess is how you spelled it. You say it. You is good, is what that means in the original language. And logos is for word, right? So it's like this idea of this good word. And so it's to speak well of or to wish the best blessings for someone. That's really what it means in the original language, that you're to speak well of them or to wish the best blessings for someone. And I'm going, how do you do that, right? For somebody who persecutes you, bless those who persecute you. Man, that's hard to do, right? When you really think about it, to really speak well of them and to wish the best blessings for them. That's hard. It's hard for us to do. It's easy. It's easy to speak well of somebody that I like, right? If I like somebody, it's very easy to speak well of them and to be like, oh, that person's awesome. Man, they're just so cool. Like, they do this or that, and I just love when they do this. And man, have you seen them the other day? They were doing this. Like, it's easy to speak well of somebody that you like. It's not so easy when they rub you the wrong way, right? It's everybody else that's the problem. If I like you, that's great. If not, I don't know what to do, right? It's like, what do I say? What do I say about this person that rubs me the wrong way, right? But here's the thing. I want the best for those people that I love. But if I love someone, I want the best for them. Right? That's pretty easy to do. That's pretty easy. That's an easy mentality. I think that's how we all think. If I love you and I really care about you, I want the best for you. What does the scriptures tell us we're supposed to do? Who are we supposed to love? We're supposed to love everyone, right? We're supposed to love our neighbors. We're supposed to, right? So you start thinking about that a little bit, you're like, oh man, maybe I'm missing the boat at times with the way I talk about people or the way I think about people. Because when somebody I don't like gets what they deserve, in my eyes, sometimes I'm pretty secretly happy about that, right? I'm not necessarily wishing the best on that person. I'm going, they got what they deserved, right? Right? Like, they've been rubbing me the wrong way for quite a while now, and they've been really pushing it, and they got what they deserved, right? Something happened to them, and sometimes it's like, I knew that was coming, right? It's easy to be that way. It's easy to be that way with somebody who rubs you the wrong way and somebody you don't like. But is that what Scripture tells us that we're supposed to do? No, it says that we're supposed to wish blessings upon them, and not just blessings, but the best blessings upon them. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to do at all. Sometimes it seems downright impossible to do. And here's the thing, in the Greek language, this is a present imperative, right? It means to do, not just to do, but to continually do, right? We're to continually do this. It's to be a continual blessing to those who are a continual problem in our lives. We're to be a continual blessing to those that are a continual problem in our lives. That is hard to do. Sometimes it seems very impossible. And I can do it for a few minutes sometimes, right? It's like, in the face of that, like, hey, yeah, wish you the best, man. I really do. I hope you get something great today. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, I hope you get what you deserve, right? But I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to wish blessings upon that person. It's easy to do for a few minutes, but boy, when they just keep coming at you with things, it gets really hard. It gets really difficult. And I think it's something that it can rob our peace when we have that in our lives. And I think it's something a lot of times we don't even think about, really. We don't think about it as much. It just comes natural to us. That person rubs me the wrong way. Man, I'm going to wish something upon them. I wish they get what they deserve. Instead of thinking, I want to wish blessings upon them. Not just blessings, but the best blessings. I'm going to pray for that person. I'm going to pray that God's going to change their heart. I'm going to pray that God's going to really bless them in a huge way and that's going to really maybe turn their life around and stuff like that. That's a whole different thing. And I think when we go into that and when we step into that type of thing, that situation where we can have that type of mindset, that we can have a peace that we don't even understand at times, right? That peace that surpasses all understanding. Again, that's only found in the presence of God. Romans 12:1, it said this, it says, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. When you read that, it says, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, right? In view of God's mercy, in view of what Jesus Christ did on the cross for us and the mercy that he has shown on us, we're to offer our bodies as living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. It says that this is our true and proper worship. Here's the thing, worship is not just the songs we sing on Sunday morning, right? It's not just the songs that you're singing in your car when you're going down the road and you're having your time of worship, right? That's not what worship is. That's not all of worship, right? Worship is so much more than that. It's the life that we live. We worship God by the life that we live. And this idea of this living sacrifice, when you really think about that, this living sacrifice, it's almost like that's a contradiction, right? It's a contradicting terms there a little bit, this living sacrifice. Because when we think about sacrifices, what do we think about? We think about like even in the Old Testament, right? What did they do? They'd go out and they'd grab a lamb or something, and they would kill it, and they would sacrifice it. That's a sacrifice. It's not really a living sacrifice anymore. It's a dead sacrifice. It's something you killed, and the sacrifice didn't have a choice. It's not like you went to the lambs and went, hey, who would like to volunteer today? Right? Like, come on forward. That's not what you did. That's not how it works. The sacrifice was you went out and you picked the best one, you grabbed it, you sacrificed it, that was the end of it, right? And you think of this idea, this living sacrifice, it's like this contradiction, right? The sacrifice doesn't get a vote on what happens, right? But when you think about Jesus Christ, when you think about what he did on the cross, did he have a vote? Did he have a choice in what he did? He gave his life up willingly, right? He was a living sacrifice. He literally sacrificed himself for us. His life and what he did spoke volumes to us about what it truly means to sacrifice. He was a living sacrifice. He said, I'm doing this willingly. I'm giving my life for people, for these people, and I'm doing it of my own accord. They didn't come and just grab him and do it. No, he was a living sacrifice. In Galatians 2:20, it says this, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Right? Christ lives in me. And it's this idea, when you look at this, it's like, I've been crucified with Christ, right? I no longer live, right? It's not me that's living anymore, but it's Christ that's living inside of me. And it's not about me. When you think about that, it's not about me. It's all about him. It's about what he does in my life, and it's about him living inside of me, that living sacrifice living inside of me, and he's calling me to be a living sacrifice for him, right? To offer our bodies as living sacrifice, to submit ourselves to his will and to his authority and to his, whatever it is, his plans that he has for us and all that. It's submitting ourselves to that. And when we do that, I think, and we actually surrender ourselves to that, there's this idea of this peace that really just comes upon us. When we do that, we can have peace in a time when people would look and go, how could you possibly have peace right now? And you'd say, well, it's because of what Jesus Christ has done for me on the cross and the fact that he lives inside of me. I no longer live, but it's him who lives in me, right? And because of that, I can have peace right now with my circumstances. I can have peace with that person that's yelling and screaming at me. I can have peace with that person that's just rubbing me the wrong way all the time. I can have peace with them because I wish the best on them. I see things through God's eyes, and I see how my circumstances through his eyes, and I know that he is in control, that he lives inside of me. That's all I could ask for. And I offer myself as a living sacrifice in that way. Romans 12:16 says, live in harmony, right? What did it say? What did it say? It said, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud and do not be conceited. You know what that really means? Like when you start looking at that in the original language of this, do not be proud and do not be conceited, in the Greek, what that literally means, it means to not be proud and not be conceited. Okay? That's literally what it means, okay? There's no mincing of words there. Do not be proud and do not be conceited. Right? That is what we're to do. And when you think about people in our lives that come up and we have arguments with and stuff like that, and maybe sometimes it's us, right? You get into an argument, stuff like that, and you're like, I'm right. I'm right in this argument. I'm right, and I'm going to make sure they know it. Right? And if they don't believe me, I'm going to look up some article online or something like that to back up my point, and I'm going to show them, look, hey, you know what, this argument we're having right now, this thing's over because, look, I just looked it up, and this is what it says, right? And so you're not arguing just with me anymore. Now you're arguing with Wikipedia, right? And they're not wrong. right? And so you're like, and you get in this argument, and you're convinced that you're right. And you're having this argument with them, and you're going blow by blow with them back and forth about, I'm right, right? And it's like, I'm going to prove to you that. But here's the thing. Jesus didn't tell us to be right. Jesus didn't tell us to be right. He told us to be loving. Right? That's what he told us. He didn't say you got to be right all the time. He said you got to be loving all the time. When you're right, when you're wrong, it doesn't matter. You got to be loving. Right? We've got to be loving. And it's this idea of being loving. It's something that you think about, and you're like, you think about other people, and you're just like, I don't know. These people, they're not loving at all. They've always got to be right. And you got people on both sides of this whole thing, and you got people going, oh, liberals, man, they can't be Christians. They do this and that and whatever. And then you got people on the other side going, oh, conservatives, right? There's no possible way they could be a Christian. They're too pompous, and all this stuff, whatever. You got people on both sides slinging things at each other, especially in an election year like we just had, right? Like it's this idea of people, these liberals, conservatives, everybody in between, right? Always arguing about all kinds of things, and each one saying, I'm right. And do they always do it in a loving way? Is it always done in a loving way? When you go on Facebook and you see somebody posting something, and it's condemning somebody from the other side and what their viewpoint is, and all, do you think it's usually done in a loving way? Probably not. Do you think they're really considering the person on the other side and what their thoughts and feelings are? Nope. They just want to be right. They just want to be right, and they want to prove their point. And we have that in our conversations with a lot of people too, right? And it's this idea of this, we get into this small little world, right, of our own, and it's like, this is my worldview, and this is it, but there's this much bigger worldview out there, right? That's out there that we need to get out into, and we need to think a little bit of this. And the thing is, when we get into that small little world of ours, we stop listening, and we stop listening to respond to people, right? Because they're talking, and we're not even listening anymore. We're just trying to think of our response of what we're going to say when they're done talking, right? Because we're not even interested in what they have to say. But the thing is, we need to, instead of listening to come up with our response, what we should be doing is listening to understand, right? We should be listening to understand why they believe what it is they believe, or what the point is that they're making and why they're making this point. That's what we really should be doing. Because here's the thing, if you can't understand another's perspective, your impact will always be limited. Right? If you can't understand somebody else's perspective, your impact will always be limited. When you get into an argument and you start thinking about like these things, and somebody is telling you their viewpoint, if you've just shut your mind off and you're not paying attention to what they're saying because you're just trying to think of how you're going to respond when they're done, you've already closed your mind, and you're not even trying to understand where it is they're coming from and why they have that viewpoint. So your impact on that person is absolutely going to be limited because you don't even understand where they're coming from. You won't even try to understand where they're coming from. If you get into that conversation and that person's saying something to you you don't agree with, and you're like, I don't agree with that at all, and listen, you say, but you know what? I want to understand why you believe that. I want to understand what your thought process is and what led you to that conclusion, not because you think it's going to change your mind necessarily, but because you want to understand the person and why they say the things they say. And when you begin to understand the person and why they say the things they say, then you can have a much greater impact on that person. Because you can speak to the person and what it is that's behind that, right? Because you begin to understand them a little bit more. Maybe even you have a little bit of pity on them because of whatever it is. Or and let's just be honest, sometimes in a conversation you go, oh, maybe you're actually right if I stop and think about it, right? But let's just say they're wrong. You have some pity on them. You understand a little bit more. You go, you know what? I really wish this person could understand the truth, because there's only one truth. Truth isn't relative. You both can't be right. One of you has to be right. The other, you can't both be right. If you have two opposing views, they can't both be right. One has to be correct. And if yours is the correct view and you really feel strong about that, your wish should be that the other person would understand truth. But sometimes the only way for them to understand truth is for you to speak to that person in a way that helps them to understand it. Not by just blasting them with what you think is truth and your opinion, but talking to them about what it is that has led them to their opinion and why maybe they've gotten off a little bit here and there. And so if you can't understand another person's perspective, your impact is always going to be limited. Always. If you can't take a moment to try to at least think about the other person and where they're coming from, your impact is always going to be limited. It's this idea of, our brains, a lot of times when you get into an argument, our brains are biologically wired to protect us, right? And so I think a lot of times what happens is in our brains, we get into these conversations and our brain is trying to protect us from things that we think will harm us. And so we think what they're saying is harmful to us, so we just kind of shut it out without even thinking about it. And we're already thinking about how can we prove them wrong. And that's not a good thing to do, right? That's not how it should be. Here's the thing. Sometimes our brains will even make up a story to fill in what it is that we don't understand, right? We don't fully understand, and our brains will make up a story to fill it in, right? It's like, I think it's this, and this. And it's like, well, where'd you get that from? Well, I don't know. I just thought about that. And it's like, well, where is that actually rooted in fact? Maybe loosely. I don't know. I'd have to look it up, right? Like sometimes our brains can do that. They'll fill in a story to help us to understand things, right? If we don't understand it, it'll fill in the blanks for us sometimes. Here's the thing. We judge people a lot of times by their actions, right? By what it is they do. But when we judge ourselves, what do we want to be judged by? We want to be judged by our intentions, right? Yeah, it may not have been the thing that they appreciated or whatever, but my intentions were good, right? I want to be judged by my intentions. But when you're judging someone else, what do we typically judge them by? We judge them by their actions, right? If I did something to disappoint you, right, I'm like, but I had a good reason, right? I had a good reason to disappoint you, right? You got to give me a break, right? Because, I didn't do it on purpose, right? My intentions were good. But if you did something to offend me, you're mean and you're rude, right? Like that's instantly that, right? It's like, you're mean, I don't care what your intentions were, you offended me. Right? We jump to that so many times. Like, we're just like, you're so mean and you're so rude. But then when it's ourselves, we're like, oh, but my intentions were good. I tried to do the right thing, and yeah, maybe they didn't appreciate it, but my intentions were good. Here's the thing. The devil wants your story about others to be based in accusations. Right? He wants our story about others, when we talk about other people, to be based in accusations, that we accuse them of things and stuff like that. Right? She's about herself, or he doesn't care about anything, or I just can't trust anyone, right? Or they don't trust anyone, or I don't trust anyone, whatever it is. Like, he wants our story and our conversation about others to be based in accusations. But accusations, they erode marriages, they split friendships, and they destroy churches. Right? These accusations that we throw at other people, they can erode our relationships, our marriages, and our friendships, and they can destroy churches when these accusations start getting thrown around. And it becomes a very difficult thing, because the devil wants our story to be based in accusations, but God wants our story to be rooted in love. Right? He wants our story about other people to be rooted in love. Yeah, that person, I don't agree with them, but hey, I love that person. I pray for that person, and I wish the best for that person. I'm not accusing them of anything. I'm simply saying I don't necessarily agree with them, but I love them and I care about them. I want what's best for them. Right? And sometimes it's like, hey, I just think they need to be introduced to Jesus. Right? Because that's what's going to make the real difference in their lives. It's not me spouting off what I think are truths at them. It's a relationship with Jesus Christ that's truly going to make the difference in most people. And so it's this idea of, trying to think of the other person when you're in these arguments and you're in these things. Ephesians 4:2 says this: Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. This is another one that's it's easy, right? When you're in the middle of it, be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults, right? Making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Imagine if your life is too short, right? Your life is too short, and your calling is too great to be offended by something small, right? Your life is too short, and your calling is too great. Because what are we called to do? We're called to spread the gospel message, right? We're called to love on people. We're called to reach lost people for Jesus. That's what we're really called to do. Our life is too short, and our calling is too great by God to be offended by something small. Because being offended by something small is going to wreck those relationships. If we're offended, we're gonna start, hurling accusations and all those types of things, right? And here's the thing: imagine if Jesus was easily offended. Imagine if Jesus was easily offended. Could you imagine, like, he's sitting around, he talking to the disciples, whatever, gives them a sermon, or what goes listens, or the Sermon on the Mount, or whatever, does all that, and he goes back with his disciples, and they start asking questions. He's like, guys, you missed the whole point. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. Were you even listening? Like, what are you talking about, right? Could you imagine if he was easily offended, what that would have been like? He healed the 10 lepers, right? And 9 of them didn't say thank you. Can you imagine that? They didn't say thank you. Like, only one of them. Could you imagine if he got offended by that, what that would be like? Or Thomas, you didn't compliment my miracle. You're so focused on yourself and everything else. You didn't even compliment the fact that I'm raised from the dead and everything else, right? And you're like here questioning me on it. How offended should he be, right? Could you imagine if Jesus was easily offended? Remember this. Being offended is inevitable. We're all going to get offended at times. Living offended is a choice. What you do with it is your choice. How you respond to that offense is your choice. Proverbs 19:11 says, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. Right? It's to one's glory to overlook an offense. I like that. Right? I like that a lot. Because, you know what, I like to say that to my wife all the time, right? It's to one's glory to overlook an offense, Hey, did you read that lately, hon? You know what I mean? Like, here's the thing. Overlooking an offense, it isn't the same thing as pretending it didn't happen, okay? Let's get that straight. Overlooking an offense isn't the same thing as pretending it didn't happen, right? It's a conscious decision to let it go. It's a form of forgiveness when we let something go. This word overlook in Hebrew, it's the word avor, which means to pass over, right? To pass over. It's instead of focusing on the offense, right? Or dwelling on it or replaying it in our minds or magnifying it as something much bigger than it actually is, we choose to pass over it. You're like, I'm over it, right? Someone makes a passive-aggressive comment. You're like, I'm over it. It's okay, right? I'm going to overlook that. It's okay. Your mother-in-law corrects your kids in a way that you don't appreciate, right? You're like, it's okay. I'm over it, right? It's okay. I'm going to overlook that. Or your spouse is griping about your driving or the way you chew gum or, the way you snore at night or about the way you loaded the dishwasher or whatever it is, and they're griping and complaining about it. You're like, it's okay. I'm over it, right? It's that idea. So the best marriages are ones that forgive in real time. They forgive in real time. They choose to let it go, right? The harsh word that's spoken, they overlook it. They're willing to overlook it because they know that's not their normal personality, right? That's not their normal way of speech towards me. I know that's not coming from a place of that they don't care for me, they don't like me, they don't love me, and that it's a simple moment, it's a flicker of something there where they're aggravated or irritated by something and they said a harsh word. I'm going to overlook that. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to choose to not be offended by that. Love doesn't seek to win the argument, right? Love doesn't seek to win the argument. Love seeks to protect the relationship, right? I think so many times in relationships, people that say they love one another, they get so hung up on being right and winning the argument that they will tear each other down so far to try to win that argument that they ruin the relationship. The marriage, the friendship, the church, they suffer when all you're doing is seeking to win the argument. Because love seeks to protect the relationship. Remember Romans 12:18, it said this, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Life is too short and your calling is too great to be offended by small things. Most of the stuff that we talk about it's small. And as far as it depends on you, you should live at peace with others, with everyone, with that person, right? Oh, but I was right. But were you loving? But you know what? But I was right, but they aren't sorry. They don't recognize the problem, right? They don't recognize what they did. They haven't said that they're sorry. They haven't owned up to it. Right? How can I possibly forgive them? They don't even realize there's a problem right now. They just think they're right. It takes two to reconcile, right? It takes two to reconcile. And it takes one to forgive. Forgiveness is not dependent on the other person coming and saying they're sorry and repenting for what they've done and those types of things. That's not how forgiveness works. Forgiveness is, I forgive you for what you did. Right? I can forgive you in my heart, and you may never even recognize it, that there was a problem. But I've already forgiven you in my heart. When that harsh word comes from your spouse or from your kids or from your somebody, a best friend or somebody in the church, and there's that harsh word that comes, you have a choice. You can be offended, and you can live offended and be mad and dwell on it and replay that moment over and over in your mind, and you can go and yell at them, and you can go and try and tell them why they're wrong, and you can kind of do it, or you can go, you know what, I'm going to overlook that. I'm going to choose to forgive them for that. Right now, right here, in this moment, I forgive you for what you just said, right? It's okay. I get it. We all get frustrated at times. We all say things we don't mean at times. I'm going to forgive them for that right then and right there. Being offended is inevitable, but living offended is a choice, right? It's a choice. It's a choice that we make. If you're living right now offended by somebody and some choice they've made, that's on you, not on them, right? That's on you. That's something that you have to forgive. That's something that you have to overlook and go, you know what? I need to overlook that. I need to love that person. I need to care about that person enough to say that I love them, I care about them, and I want what's best for them. I'm going to bless them. I don't just want just a blessing on them. I want the best blessing for them because I love them. Because that's how we're supposed to treat everybody. Just remember this. I'm going to leave you with this, right? Jesus didn't tell us to be right. He told us to be loving, right? And when we get that into our minds, that can change our whole perspective on things. It can change the way we live our lives. It can change the way our relationships work. It can change the way our church operates. It can change so much stuff when you go, you know what? Jesus didn't tell us to be right. He told us to be loving. I'm going to love on other people the way that God has called me to. I'm going to overlook small offenses. I'm not going to get offended. I'm not going to live offended. I'm not going to live in this new culture of perpetual offense, right? This cancel culture. I'm not going to live in that world, and I'm not going to be part of that. I'm going to say, you know what? I love everybody. I know not everybody has the greatest feelings towards me, and they're going to say the nicest things to me, but I'm going to overlook those things. Why? Because I love them. Why do I love them? Because Jesus loves them. And he's called me to love them. He's called me to wish the best upon them, even to those that I disagree with. Right? And so, as we think about this, as we're ramping up to Christmas, I just want us to think about this a little bit, right? That Jesus didn't tell us to be ready, he told us to be loving. And how are we maybe missing some of the peace in our lives because of this stuff? And what do we need to do to correct it? How can we be a loving people, right? People that just love on other people to the point where we can overlook those offenses. We can do that. We can forgive people that haven't even asked for forgiveness so that we can have that peace that we should have from God at this time. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you so much again for this opportunity for us to be able to dig into your word a little bit, to be able to think about what it means to have peace in our lives and what are some of the things that get in the way of that peace at times and things, Father. I pray that you would help us to really wrestle with some of that in our own lives, to think about our own relationships and the people that maybe drive us crazy and how we can handle those appropriately. Father, I pray that you would help us to be a people that love one another and that we love those who persecute us, that we heap blessings upon them, Father, and not just out of spite, Father. That's not why we do it. We should be doing it because we love them and we genuinely care about them. And we want them to have that peace that we have, that we can find in you, that peace that surpasses all understanding. And Father, I pray that you'd help us to share that peace with others and to do that